Have you ever thought about how weird it is that you can't remember being a baby? Seriously, think about that for a second. You can probably remember what you did last week. You might remember your first day at school, your first kiss, that embarrassing thing you said 3 years ago that still keeps you awake at night. But there are entire years of your life that have completely vanished. Not months, years. And the strange part is, those missing years weren't boring. They weren't uneventful. They might actually be the most important years of your entire life. That's when you learned language, when you learned trust, when you learned fear, when you learned who your family were. You were there for every second of it, and yet you can't remember any of it. So where did those memories go? And if they're really gone, who exactly was the person who lived them? This is KainosDMT-Lounge, where we have deep, meaningful talks. And tonight, we're asking a question most people never stop to think about. You were there, so why can't you remember it? Scientists call it childhood amnesia, which sounds like some rare condition. But it isn't. Almost every single person on Earth experiences it. And for a long time, people thought the explanation was simple. Babies can't form memories. Case closed. Except that's not true. In fact, it's so far from the truth that it creates an even bigger mystery. Because babies are basically learning machines. Think about everything a baby manages to figure out in just a few years. They learn faces, voices, language, emotion, social behavior, cause and effect. They learn who makes them feel safe. They learn who doesn't. None of that is possible without memory. If babies couldn't remember things, they'd never learn anything. So the real question isn't whether babies create memories. The real question is why those memories seem to disappear. And that's where things start getting strange. Most people imagine memory like a phone. Something happens. A photo gets taken, the photo gets saved. Then later you pull it back up. Simple. But your brain doesn't work like that. Your brain is less like a camera and more like a storyteller. Every time you remember something, your brain isn't replaying a recording. It's rebuilding the memory, piece by piece. Which means every memory you have is actually a reconstruction, a best guess, a story your brain tells itself based on fragments. That's already weird enough, but now imagine trying to build memories while the machine doing the remembering is still being built. Because that's what infancy really is. Your brain isn't a finished product. It's a construction site. Connections are being created, removed, rewired, expanded every single day. In fact, during your first few years of life, your brain develops faster than it ever will again. Right now, your brain is relatively stable. The brain you had as a baby was changing so fast that it was practically becoming a different brain every few months. Imagine writing a diary while somebody keeps replacing the pages. You write something down, turn around, the page is gone. Write something else, that page disappears too. The memories may have existed, but the system responsible for storing and retrieving them was constantly changing underneath them. Some scientists think that's one of the biggest reasons those early memories become inaccessible later in life. But here's where things get really interesting, because some researchers don't believe those memories are completely gone. Think about that. What if your earliest memories still exist somewhere inside your brain? Not accessible, not readable, not conscious, but still there. Imagine finding an old computer in your attic. Inside it are thousands of files, photos, videos, documents. The information still exists. The problem is you no longer have the software needed to open them. Some scientists think your childhood memories may be trapped in a similar way. The version of your brain that created those memories no longer exists. So the version of your brain trying to access them can't read them properly. It's like finding a book written in a language you once knew but can no longer understand. And honestly, that's kind of unsettling, because it means there may be entire experiences hidden inside your own mind that you'll never consciously revisit. Not because they're gone, because you've changed too much. And that raises a much bigger question. If the person who created those memories no longer exists, who exactly were they? Think about yourself at 10 years old. You can probably picture them. Maybe you remember your bedroom, your friends, your school. Now think about yourself at 5. The image gets a little fuzzier. Now think about yourself at 2, nothing, or almost nothing. Eventually, the trail just ends. But somebody was there, a real person, a real version of you. They laughed, they cried, they got frustrated, they got excited, they learned things. They experienced the world for the very first time, yet you know almost nothing about them. And when you really think about it, that's kind of insane. Imagine meeting a stranger who knew absolutely everything about you. Every fear, every habit, every insecurity, every preference, every tiny detail. But you knew absolutely nothing about them. That's basically your relationship with your younger self. They helped create you, yet you can barely remember them. At this point, the conversation isn't really about memory anymore. It's about identity. Most people think they're one continuous person, the same person they've always been. But are you? The version of you at 2 years old had different fears, different desires, different understanding, different goals. The version of you at 10 was different again. The version of you at 16 was different again. And the version of you 10 years from now will probably look back at today's version and think, what was I doing? So where exactly does one version end and the next begin? That's a question philosophers have been arguing about for thousands of years, and nobody really has a perfect answer, because on one hand, you're obviously the same person, but on the other hand, you're clearly not. Every year you replace old beliefs, old habits, old fears, old goals. You shed parts of yourself and grow new ones. Maybe being human isn't about staying the same. Maybe it's about constantly becoming somebody new. And if that's true, then childhood amnesia isn't just a memory problem. It's evidence of how dramatically we change. Think about it. The baby who learned to walk is you. The child who cried because they lost their favorite toy is you. The teenager who made terrible decisions is you. The person listening to this right now is also you. Yet every version feels like a different character, like chapters in the same book written by different authors, and somehow they all blend together into one story. But here's the really fascinating part. Even if you can't remember those early years, they still shaped you. The way you form relationships, the way you react to stress, the way you see the world, the way you trust people, the way you deal with fear. Some of those foundations were built before your first conscious memory, which means parts of your personality may have been influenced by experiences you'll never remember having. That's crazy when you think about it. Imagine buying a house. You move in, decorate it, paint the walls, replace the furniture, make it your own. But you never saw the foundations being built. You never watched the concrete being poured. You never saw the decisions that determined where every room would go. Yet those hidden decisions affect everything that comes later. That's childhood. The foundations are built before you're aware they're being built. And one day you wake up and call the finished structure me. But maybe forgetting those years isn't a flaw. Maybe it's a feature. Imagine remembering every single moment since birth. Every bottle, every nap, every cry, every random sound, every face, every tiny detail. Your brain would be overwhelmed. Instead, it seems to keep the lessons and discard most of the footage. The experience remains, the recording doesn't. Which brings us back to where we started. There are years of your life that have completely disappeared, not because they weren't important, not because nothing happened, but because the person who experienced them was living inside a brain that no longer exists. And somehow, despite never remembering those years, they may have shaped you more than any other period of your life. The strangest thing about childhood amnesia isn't that your memories disappeared. It's that somebody experienced them, a real person, a version of you that laughed, cried, learned, felt safe, felt afraid, saw the world for the very first time, and somehow that person helped build everything you are today. Your habits, your fears, your relationships, your personality. Yet you'll never actually remember meeting them. When you really think about it, that's kind of incredible. There are chapters of your own story that you'll never be able to read, not because they weren't important, but because the person who wrote them no longer exists in the same form. Maybe that's what makes being human so strange and so fascinating. You're constantly changing, constantly becoming someone new, while carrying pieces of every version of yourself that came before, even the ones you've forgotten. This has been today's deep, meaningful talk. Hope you enjoyed the DMT. The deeper you look, the stranger things become. Until next time, keep asking why.